This is David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave. And what we're really quickly going to talk about is if Trump's presidency and his economic policy as a president, was it beneficial to working class and poor Republicans? And the reason why we're going to examine this is because when Trump ran for office, part of his narrative was that he was going to make America great again. He was going to drain the swamp. He was going to put the working class person back in a position of prosperity and prominence. And now that he's on his way out of office, what we want to do is kind of examine his economic policies and really understand were his economic policies really beneficial to the people that he really marketed to. And one of the things that Trump did that kind of is going to define his presidency is going to be the Trump tax cut. And the Trump tax cut, he really spoke about the fact that it was not going to just be beneficial to the rich, but it was going to be beneficial to middle income people. And we're looking at some of the data. So the Congressional Budget Office, you can go look up who they are. We sometimes called the CBO. They projected that Trump's tax cut was going to cost the United States over a 10-year period, $1.5 trillion. Right? Mitch McConnell, he himself stated that this particular tax cut was going to be a revenue neutral bill or maybe even a revenue producer. Not sure how that works if you cut taxes. And we want to understand that the real benefit, right, of that tax cut went to corporations at a 1.35 trillion. And then by extension, that benefit went to their top executives and into their shareholders. And we want to see that for working class people, how did that tax cut benefit them? And that kind of set the stage for where we're currently at right now today. And we're going to kind of discuss that. What we have with that tax cut is that they slashed, right? So Republicans in Congress, the corporate tax rate got slashed from 35% to 21%. And we just don't mean that, you close loopholes, right? It allows people to almost pay nothing in taxes as far from a corporate standpoint. And so they just create more and more loopholes to not pay taxes. And a lot of people will say, well, you know what? If you just have a really good accountant, you can get around some of these things. That's cool. But we understand is this. His policy was not supposed to be for people that just have really, really good accountants. His economic policy and his tax plan was supposed to benefit middle income people, not the people that have the $400 an hour accounting. And we want to understand that if the only people that really benefit from his tax policy were corporations, then how does that therefore benefit the middle income people? And we want to see that they're talking about in this article in 2018, corporate tax revenue fell by $135 billion. Under the new tax code, the effective corporate tax rate fell from 17.2% to 8.8%. And nearly 1/5 of all Fortune 500 companies owe nothing in corporate tax, including some of these names: Amazon, Chevron, FedEx, and Starbucks. Well, how does that benefit middle income people inside the United States? And so the argument a lot of times for allowing these major corporations to do what they want to do, and this is just my personal opinion, is that they should be allowed to do what they want to do. The argument is that, well, they should be allowed to kind of, operate the way they want to operate inside the United States, because if not, they will leave the United States. Well, some of the largest companies inside the United States, we're looking at a Starbucks, we're looking at an Amazon, we're looking at a FedEx, not really Chevron. Some of their largest markets are the U.S. So we take Amazon, for example. Their largest market is probably going to be the United States. They can't operate in China because you got Alibaba. So if they leave the United States and say, well, we're going to move all our offices to another country because we don't like the way we're being taxed. Well, all you got to do is tell them, okay, that's cool. You just can't operate inside the United States. You can do no business activity inside the U.S. If you look at a company like Apple's, I think they sell more iPhones in China than they sell in the United States, with the United States being their second largest market. However, Apple would not want to lose their second largest market of the U.S. because what do you think that would do to their share price? Then on top of that, they would be boxed into China. So this mentality that we have to allow American corporations and we have to give them every advantage, right, to allow them to become successful, or else they won't do business inside the United States. That only makes sense if they're still allowed to, they will move all their offices outside the United States. That only makes sense if you still allow them to do business inside the United States. If you tell them if you move all your offices out of the United States, you'll no longer be allowed to do any business out of the United States. I don't think you get that same kind of result by taxing them. But we want to understand that many of these corporations, a fifth of Fortune 500, owe nothing in corporate tax. Nothing. They owe zero. Okay. Now, the Trump tax cuts did not allow the middle income workers to owe zero in taxes, but it did allow these particular corporations, right? So they were able to utilize a lot of loopholes. Then we also talk about the offshore loophole where we keep our money offshore, therefore we don't pay taxes. And Trump did nothing to tax that revenue from these American-based firms, but they using accounting measures say that they made their money in another part of the world, and therefore they don't have to pay taxes on that. Trump got that to maybe be taxed at around 8%. And then what happened was you had a massive run on the stock market. We had a lot of what we call stock buybacks, in which the corporation says, you know what, we're going to buy back some of our stock because we believe that it's so high, it's going to be beneficial for us to own a lot of our own stock, right? And there's a lot of different reasons for that. And then all this led up to what we have happened in March was COVID. But what we want to talk about is that based on institution of taxation and economic policy, the tax cut gave middle class workers or middle wage earners around $65 a month. And those tax cuts are supposed to expire in 2025 or 2027. So while the corporations were getting billions of dollars and trillions of dollars in tax relief and not having to pay taxes at all, the benefit to middle wage earners was around $65 a month. That's what they voted for, to get $65 a month in tax relief from the guy that was supposed to make America great again and drain the swamp. OK, now this set the stage, right? This set the stage for COVID. So then what happened during COVID? The market fell. The Federal Reserve had to come in and save the market with a lot of liquidity. So what did they essentially do is they just started printing a massive amount of money to save the market and underpin the market. OK, now the question is, well, how does that affect inflation? So you have middle wage earners whose income already has not gone up. And now we have this event where, right, they essentially produce more money. They make the pool of money larger. Well, how is that going to affect inflation, not just this year, but as time goes on? Then what you have is you have something called the CARES Act. So this is going to be a 2.2 trillion relief package. Inside that 2.2 trillion relief package was a stimulus check for, workers at around $1,200. So what you see was that during his presidency, the billionaires, the wealthy people got massive amount of tax relief. Corporations, massive amount of tax relief. Essentially manipulated the estate tax to make sure that didn't increase. And then when we have a catastrophe and government workers need relief, they get $1,200 a month. And then what we've seen is ever since you've gotten that $1,200, right? They've been going back and forth literally for almost half a year on whether or not to give you another $1,200. Now I think that $1,200 is turning to $600 because they never had a real incentive to help out working class and poor people. This was all just a charade to get into office, because if you really value that group of people, you could have essentially did an executive order, right, to get that relief package through. You could have did an executive order, right? But instead, you want to, go through this particular process. We've got to go through both houses and things of that nature, where you know that it can get stonewalled, it can get stagnated, and it can be used as a political football. OK, so what you want to ask yourself is this: during this COVID situation, right, during this Trump presidency, and now we're moving into COVID, has your economic situation got better or has it gotten worse? Jeff Bezos' economic situation has gotten a lot better. Elon Musk's economic situation has gotten a lot better. Warren Buffett's economic situation has gotten a lot better. In reality, their economic situation would have gotten better regardless of who was president, because the national politicians served them. And when we look at this particular guy's presidency, we look at Trump's presidency in retrospect. Was he able to accomplish anything that he said that he was going to accomplish on his way into the office? And from an economic standpoint, how has his presidency benefited working class and poor Republicans? And this is why so many of them are caught up in the cult of personality of Trump is because they can't speak to policy because it doesn't exist, especially economic policy. It doesn't exist. This guy's job was to essentially distract everybody from what the Republican Party was doing in office for 4 years. And he wasn't a good enough of a distraction to get reelected for another 4 years. And that essentially was his job. And so when people talk about Trump's presidency 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, I don't really know what they're going to talk about. What is going to be the milestone or what he's going to hang his presidency on? Like what policy did he create? It may be the CARES Act that he signed the CARES Act in, but there's really not going to be anything outstanding. Now, you may be looking at this and say, well, you know what? How does this relate to me? You know, these national level politicians are going to do what they're going to do regardless. What I want you to understand is that we keep seeing the same story over and over and over again with national level politicians. They could care less about working class people, right? That's not their job. Their job is to really make sure that the ruling class stays the ruling class. So I really want to encourage you to start looking at ways in which you locally, with your own ability, can improve your economic situation, whether through investing, cryptocurrency, precious metals, trading. What can you do? Because we see time and time again, when they put these particular people in office, they say whatever they got to say to get into office to make sure that particular party has somebody in that seat. And then once they get in that seat, they distract, right, their constituency of voters with a lot of red meat, with a lot of red herrings. And then behind the scenes, they're implementing policy that is based on, you know, protecting their real, right, their real constituency, which are the people that gave them money to get into office. This guy is in office. Biden is going to do the exact same thing. He's going to speak to taxing the rich, right? Because that's what he believes the masses of people that voted him in wanted to hear. He's going to speak to it. But at the end of the day, nothing different is going to change. There will be no difference in actual policy, economic policy to help out working class and poor people, regardless of their color, regardless of what side of the political spectrum that they're on. They're not going to get any help, because it shouldn't be taking 6 months to decide to give people $1,200. That's not even a lot of money. It's not a lot of money. And it takes 6 months, to decide whether or not we're going to give a bunch of people $1,200. They acting like they decided to give people $100,000. And you want to understand is that none of these people are coming to save you, right? They're not. And so to even give them any attention outside of how what they're going to do is going to affect you economically, to me, doesn't really make a lot of sense.